The knock was too soft for wind, too light for snow. Yet it pulled Coulter wind from his chair like a thread around his ribs. He stood slowly, boots creaking on the warped floor, and opened the cabin door into the white hush of a deep winter dusk. Snowflakes curled sideways on the wind like torn lace. And there, half sunk in the drift, was a child. She couldn't have been more than 5. Her cheeks were red as blood apples, her lips cracked white. She wore no coat, just a shawl tied crooked across narrow shoulders, and in her mittenless hands she held out a small, lopsided cloth doll. "Can you buy her?" she whispered. "Mama's sick." The wind answered for Coulter at first, rushing around the cabin's eaves with a sound like mourning. He blinked, looking past her, scanning for shadows in the snow. Nothing. "Where's your mother?" The girl turned, pointed to the woodshed. Not the trail. Not the road. The woodshed, where broken things were kept. Coulter stepped into the cold without thinking. The snow soaked through his socks in seconds. The girl followed close behind as he rounded the cabin, breath steaming like smoke from a shot barrel. And there she was. A woman, folded in on herself like a prayer, crumpled against the wall, barely conscious. Her dark hair clung to her face in wet streaks. No hat. No gloves. Her breath rattled. Coulter knelt. Her lashes fluttered once. "We didn't mean to trespass," she rasped. "Just needed to rest." "You're not trespassing," he said, voice hoarse from disuse. "You're freezing to death." He lifted her carefully, surprised at how little she weighed. Like a sack of grain gone half empty. The girl walked beside them, holding the doll against her chest now. She said nothing more. Inside, the fire was still alive, but dim. He fed it with 2 logs and the last of the dried sagebrush. The girl sat near it, cross-legged, silent as stone. Her eyes followed Coulter's every move as he laid her mother on the cot and fetched blankets, water, the jar of pickled onions that might coax salt back into her blood. "You got a name?" Coulter asked. The girl shook her head. "She calls me baby. That's all." He looked over at the woman. Her skin was waxen, fever-pale under the red of windburn. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Coulter reached for the kettle, filled it, hung it back over the fire. The girl leaned forward, letting the steam touch her cheeks. Her doll's head lolled to the side, stitched eyes nearly worn away, one arm half detached. She stared into the flames, and Coulter watched her instead. It had been 3 winters since anyone had crossed that threshold. 3 winters since Coulter had buried his own daughter on the hill behind the cabin. Snow never melted there. He never took the cross down. "You hungry?" She nodded once. He gave her hard biscuits soaked in honey water, and she devoured them slow, careful, like a girl afraid to finish. "What's your mama's name?" She hesitated. "Ione." Coulter nodded. "You stay near the fire. I'll check her." The woman's hands were raw, knuckles split from cold. Her boots, if they could be called that, were mismatched and waterlogged. Her dress was homespun, faded green, patched with care but clinging to her thin frame like regret. He sat on the chair near the bed, elbows on his knees. What kind of man lets a woman and child get that close to dying without asking why? Maybe the kind who knows the answer already. They must have been walking for days. Snow clung to their hems like ghosts. No wagon. No horse. No past, it seemed, except the one they were running from. The kettle hissed. The girl stood to pour some into a chipped mug. Her fingers barely reached, but she managed it, then brought it to the bedside. She lifted Ione's head with practiced hands and tilted the drink gently to her lips. Coulter didn't move. Just watched. That small gesture was cleaner than any sermon. He pulled a second blanket from the chest and wrapped it around her shoulders. She blinked up at him, uncertain. "What's her name?" he asked, nodding toward the doll. The girl looked down, thoughtful. "Don't think she ever had one." "Then she's lucky. Still got a chance to be anyone." That night, Ione coughed in her sleep. The girl curled near the hearth, blanket tangled around her legs. Coulter sat by the window with his rifle laid across his lap, though there was no threat. He wasn't guarding the cabin. He was guarding the quiet inside it. The wind moaned outside, and memories came with it. A smaller shape once dancing barefoot on that very rug. A laugh that bounced like river stones. A fever that came too fast, too cruel. A grave dug in snow so hard it cracked his shovel blade. And the doll. That doll. He rose and crossed the room, careful not to wake the child. Kneeling, he gently lifted it from her arms. The stitches on its leg were uneven, the fabric familiar. On the hem, nearly faded, the letter M. His daughter's first initial. Madeline. He stared at it for a long while. The stuffing inside, he remembered, was lavender. His wife had sewn it with herbs from their wedding garden. He set the doll back, gently. By morning, the fever had broken. Ione sat up slowly, propped against the wall, her voice hoarse but sure. "You should have let me freeze," she said. "No. I didn't ask to be rescued. I didn't ask to be needed." They stared at each other for a long time. Her hands clenched in the blanket. "She doesn't talk to strangers. She talked to me." "That doll." Ione's eyes flared, then dimmed. "We found her in a ditch. Thought she'd keep my girl company." Coulter didn't answer. He didn't need to. "You can have it back," she added, quieter. "If she meant something to you." He looked over at the girl, who had fallen asleep again beside the fire, cheek resting on her doll's patched body. "She does now." And for the first time, something passed between them that wasn't suspicion. Not trust, not yet. But a breath held a little less tightly. Ione's shoulders sagged. She touched her temple. "We'll be gone when she can walk again. No need." "There's always need," she said, more bitter than warning. "For moving on. For disappearing." But Coulter stood, walked to the stove, and stirred the beans. "There's beans," he said. "And enough firewood to last till spring." Outside, the snow fell heavy again. Inside, the fire crackled, and the child murmured something in her sleep. He leaned in to hear, expecting nonsense. But she whispered, clear as glass, she wasn't really for sale. He sat back slowly, heart caught in his throat. "I know," he said. But she didn't answer. Already dreaming again, arms around the doll, like she had always belonged there. And Coulter, for the first time in years, didn't feel the silence pressing in. He felt it shifting, making room. Which is why, when he stepped out that night to check the horses and saw fresh tracks in the snow, a second pair of adult-sized prints not matching Ione's or his own, he stood still a long time, letting the cold bite into his bones. Because someone else had come to the cabin, and they'd left heading back toward town. The first light of morning cracked pale across the frost-furred window, casting faint gold over the girl's curls as she sat cross-legged near the fire, drawing circles in ash with a stick. The cabin smelled of boiled beans and pine smoke, and the cold had crept back into the corners where firelight didn't reach. Coulter Wynne stood at the stove, quiet in his motions. He wasn't used to morning with company. The sound of another breath in the room. The shuffle of small feet. The way the fire seemed warmer when someone else sat beside it. Ione hadn't spoken since yesterday. She sat wrapped in the wool blanket near the cot, legs tucked beneath her, gaze fixed not on the man but the shadows just beyond him. She looked stronger, but not settled. As if her body had thawed while her spirit remained frozen stiff. "Don't got much," Coulter said, setting down a bowl in front of her. "Beans, dried apples, old biscuits. You can pick the weevils out." She picked up the spoon, but her jaw stayed tight. "We won't stay long." "You're welcome to." "I didn't say you had to." "Doesn't mean we should." The girl, still barefoot despite the chill, padded to the table and climbed onto a stool. She held her doll like a treasure she'd stolen. Her eyes flicked between them, measuring the space. "She said you smiled last night," Ione said suddenly, not looking at him. "When you saw the doll." "I did." "Why?" Coulter stirred his own bowl. The spoon clinked against tin. He could have lied. Could have changed the subject. But something in the way Ione's voice softened at the edges made him answer honest. She belonged to my daughter once. That cracked something. Ione's eyes lifted, cautious but caught. Where's she now? Gone. 3 winters back. Fever took her fast. Silence pooled again. But it wasn't the same. This one didn't sting. It listened. The girl leaned her chin on her fist. She had a name? Madeline, Coulter said, mouth tightening. She liked stories where the sky turned different colors. Ione lowered her eyes. We'll find another doll. No, Coulter said gently. You keep her. Doesn't seem like she minds. The girl gave a shy nod and hugged the doll tighter. Later that morning, Coulter saddled the horse for a trip into town. He hadn't planned to leave the cabin, but they needed medicine. He'd seen the tremble still in Ione's fingers. He didn't say it aloud. He just packed it, left a knife on the table, the fire stoked, and told the girl to keep the kettle full. Ione's eyes flickered toward the window. Is it far? Half day there and back, unless you ride hard. She and I'll be gone by sundown, she murmured. You said that yesterday. This time I mean it. But she didn't move when he left. And when he looked back, she was standing at the door with one hand against the frame, watching him ride into the snowy distance like she wasn't sure if she hoped he'd return. Town was thin with life that morning. Smoke plumed from chimneys, and horses stood huddled near railings as if mourning some quiet grief of their own. At the store, old Tobias Grigg leaned on the counter like time had forgotten to lift him. His eyes sharpened when Coulter stepped in, brushing snow off his hat. Well, look what the frost dragged in. Need willow bark, and whatever's left of the molasses. Tobias slid the jars across the counter. Heard whispers, he said low. You got company out there. Coulter didn't answer. Folks asking why a man keeps 2 strangers in his house. One of 'em young and unwed. She's sick. The kid's 5. People forget the details when they want a story bad enough. Coulter tucked the medicine into his pack. They can tell stories. I'll keep the fire going. As he turned to leave, Tobias said, Watch Maureen Fitch. She's been sniffing trouble like a hound. Always said your place was haunted with loss. Now she's calling it a house of sin. Coulter paused only long enough to say, Tell her the house is mine, and the sin was 3 winters ago. Back at the cabin, the girl was waiting by the window, tapping her fingers against the pane like she was counting snowflakes. You came back, she said. I said I would. She handed him a folded piece of paper. Childish drawing. 3 stick figures. One tall, one small, one curled up in bed. She drew us, Ione said, standing behind the girl with a blanket wrapped like a shawl. Her eyes held more warmth than that morning, but still wary. She said your house smells like cinnamon bark and sadness. Coulter gave a dry chuckle. That's about right. That afternoon passed in quiet rhythm. Ione helped shell beans while the girl sang to herself, her feet swinging under the table. The cabin, for the first time in years, held sound. Small sound. Human sound. As dusk fell, Ione set her spoon down. We can't repay you. I didn't ask for anything. I know. That's the problem. He looked up. You ever have someone help you without reason? No. Not without expecting something after. Then maybe now's a good time to let it happen. She shook her head, but didn't argue further. Just stood and went to tend the fire. He watched her. Not for beauty, though she was beautiful in the way scars can be, but for how she moved. Carefully, like someone always preparing to leave. That night, he found her outside after supper. She sat on the porch step, knees drawn up, watching the snow swirl. You're not from here, he said. No. Running from something? Always. He sat beside her, careful not to crowd the silence. I was sold once, she said after a long pause, to a man who said he'd keep me safe. When I got sick, he left us near the river trail. Told me to pray someone else had mercy. Coulter said nothing. I didn't expect a cabin, she whispered. Didn't expect firewood already split, or a man who knew how to make porridge right. I didn't expect a girl knocking on my door asking me to buy a doll. She gave a brittle laugh. That wasn't her idea. I told her not to beg. She didn't beg. No, Ione agreed softly. She offered something. Coulter reached into his coat, pulled out a tiny red ribbon. Faded. Frayed. This was Madeline's, he said. She tied it around that doll's neck. Said it was her lasso, so the dreams wouldn't run off. Ione touched the ribbon. I'm sorry. So am I. They sat there as the snow fell soft and slow, blanketing the world like a promise no one dared to say aloud. Inside, the girl lay curled on the cot, clutching the doll close, her breath fogging the window beside her. As Coulter turned to go back in, Ione reached for his sleeve. Not to stop him, just to touch something steady. He looked down at her hand, then at her face. You don't have to earn warmth, he said. Sometimes it's just given. Ione's lips trembled. Not in my world. Then maybe you need a new world. And that was when they heard it, the crack of a branch out past the trees. Coulter stepped forward, instincts sharp. Ione froze. In the distance, just at the edge of the woods, a flicker of movement. A figure. Watching. Then gone. Coulter turned back, face grim. They didn't just leave, he said. Whoever came last night, they came back. The wind was sharp enough to split bark when Ione stepped into town. She wore Coulter's old coat, stiff with years and stitched at the elbows, and her bonnet hung loose, barely hiding the pallor on her cheeks. The girl had begged to come, but Ione refused. This wasn't a journey for soft hands and hopeful eyes. She carried a sewing kit wrapped in oilcloth and a tin of dried dandelion tea, meant to be bartered. Her boots were still cracked at the sole. She walked slow. Not from weakness now, but because she'd learned what kind of woman townfolk saw when she walked fast. The general store sat squat and listing at the center of the square, where 3 muddy roads met like threads tangled too long. She entered quietly, the bell above the door tinkling like a guilty confession. Inside, the light was dim, just enough to make out the eyes that turned toward her and didn't look away. Maureen Fitch stood by the fabric rolls, her gray shawl starched to blade-like stiffness. Her voice cut across the hush like a cold knife. Well, I thought you'd left. Ione didn't answer. She moved toward the back shelves, running fingers across soap bars and tallow candles, her threadbare presence soaking into the wood. Funny, Maureen continued, how some women just drift in without name or home, and suddenly think they deserve kindness. Tobias Grigg looked up from the counter but said nothing. His eyes flicked between them, then dropped to the ledger. Ione pulled her sewing kit from her satchel, quiet and deliberate. I trade work. Stitching. I can mend or patch. You don't belong here, Maureen hissed. Don't think you can warm your way into this town like you did with that rancher. Folks talk. I'm not asking for place, Ione said softly. Just thread. You're asking for everything. Food, fire, and now sympathy. Maureen stepped closer, voice rising. And we all know that doll wasn't yours to begin with. Wasn't it buried with his girl? You brought it back to make him weak. Ione's fingers curled around the oilcloth. It was given. You stole it. Just like you stole that cabin's warmth. Maureen turned to the room. That's what she is. A beggar in a widow's skin. And every smile she gives is a lie. The stillness thickened. And then a child's voice cracked it in half. Stop yelling. Everyone turned. The girl had slipped in, barefoot, cheeks flushed, clutching her doll like a shield made of cotton and hope. She looked smaller than ever beneath the dusty light, but her chin was lifted like stone. She didn't steal nothing, the girl said. Mama stitched other people's holes even when hers bled. And Coulter says we're allowed to stay. Ione knelt. You were supposed to wait at the wagon. The girl shook her head. I saw her face through the window. I knew she'd lie. Maureen scoffed. That man won't defend you forever. He's just lonely. You'll see. A bootstep thudded behind them. Coulter Wynne stood in the doorway, the cold still clinging to his shoulders like a storm that hadn't yet passed. He didn't speak right away, just looked at them, his eyes slow and steady, burning not hot, but deep. Then he stepped forward, scooped the girl gently into his arms, and looked at Maureen. "I don't listen to your stories." Maureen bristled. "You should. I listened once, 3 winters back. You said the fever would pass, that I should pray and wait." He set the girl down. She died waiting. No one dared breathe. Coulter turned to Ione. "You done?" Ione stood, something cracking in her spine, shame trying to rise again, but finding no place to land. "Yes." He took the basket from her hand. "Then we go." Outside, the snow had softened to flurries. Coulter's wagon sat parked beneath a crooked pine. As they walked, people stared from doorways, curtains. Whispers followed like frost on breath. The girl hummed. Not nervously. Steadily. Back at the cabin, the fire was low, and Coulter set more logs without a word. Ione sat on the edge of the cot, her shoulders hunched. "I shouldn't have gone alone," she said. "No," he replied. "But not because of them." She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't flinch. "Are we a burden?" "Only if you plan to keep leaving. I've never been wanted long." "I didn't ask how long. I said you could stay." She reached into her basket and pulled out the ribbon. The one Coulter had shown her. She'd braided it with a scrap of her own hair, thread-thin and dark. "For your girl," she whispered. "Something of both." Coulter didn't take it right away. Just stared at the offering like it might fall apart if touched too quick. "She gave me this doll," Ione added. "It was all she had. Now I give this." He took the ribbon and turned toward the mantel, where a small wooden box stood. He opened it, placed the braid inside without a sound, then closed the lid. Behind him, the girl crawled into her cot. The fire cracked gently. "I liked what you said," she mumbled. "About lassoing dreams." Ione smiled faintly. "You understand it?" "Not yet. But I think I want to." That night, Ione sat on the porch again, but this time the door remained open behind her. Coulter joined her, hands in his coat pockets. The wind had calmed, but its memory lingered in the air like an old bruise. "You ever think about leaving again?" he asked. "I still might. I won't stop you. But if you stay, it can't be halfway." She stared out at the woods. "I don't know how to live in a place that doesn't want me gone." "Well, maybe it ain't the place. Maybe it's just been too long since someone stayed when you needed them." They sat in silence a while. Then she asked, "What about the man who came before? The one who left prints?" Coulter didn't answer immediately. "He was watching again today," he said finally. "At the tree line. Didn't come close. But he's not just passing through." She swallowed. "He could be the one who left us on the trail. Or someone Maureen stirred up. Either way," he turned to her, "you're not the one hiding anymore." Inside, the girl slept, the doll beside her, and the ribbon now tied gently around its waist like a sash. Outside, the stars were sharp, and the wind carried no words. But the fear was no longer in the dark. It was just beyond the edge of firelight, waiting. And Coulter had already started gathering kindling. The storm hit 2 nights later, full white fury that buried fences and swallowed roads whole. Wind screamed down from the mountains like it had a name to avenge. The shutters rattled, snow piled high against the door, and inside the cabin, everything slowed to breath and heartbeat. Ione fed the fire in silence. The girl played nearby, tracing the doll's stitched face with her thumb like she was memorizing someone she didn't want to forget. Coulter sat near the window, sharpening his knife with long, careful strokes. He hadn't said much since the last sighting of the man near the treeline. No one had seen him up close. No words exchanged. But the air had changed, the way animals go still before lightning. He didn't trust silence anymore. That night, When the girl slipped outside without a coat, no one noticed at first. The fire had lulled them, and Ione had just closed her eyes for the first time in what felt like days. It was the cold, sharp, unnatural that made Coulter stir. He rose, checked the corner where she always sat, and found only the doll, alone on the floor. Panic bloomed like frostbite. The back door was open just a crack, snow blowing in around the frame. Ione bolted upright. Where is she? Gone outside. No, she knows not to. Coulter was already lacing his boots, pulling on his coat, voice low but firm. She wouldn't have gone far. I'll find her. Ione grabbed his arm. You don't understand. She never wanders. Not in weather like this. Her voice broke. She's looking for something. Coulter hesitated, then ran. Snow blinded fast. It came sideways, clawing at his face, erasing his tracks as he made them. He called her name once, twice, then fell to silence. The world swallowed sound. He followed the wind where it seemed weakest, toward the grove near the grave marker. And there, by the crooked pine tree, he saw it. A scrap of fabric. The doll's dress. He found her curled beneath the tree, arms tucked around her knees, half buried. Eyes open, unfocused, lips tinged blue. Hey, he whispered, lifting her into his arms, pressing her to his chest. No, not like this. She was too light. Lighter than she had been. As if she'd poured some part of herself into the storm. Her eyes blinked slowly. I was trying to get a pine cone. For Mama's cough. Coulter carried her back barefoot through the snow, every step a prayer that didn't need words. Her breath fluttered against his collarbone, but it was there. He didn't look back once. Inside, Ione had torn the cabin apart searching, her hair wild, tears frozen on her face. When she saw them, she dropped to her knees. She needs heat, Coulter said. Now. They stripped her wet clothes, wrapped her in every blanket they had, and set her between them near the fire. Ione kissed her cheeks, her forehead, whispering her name like it was a promise she hadn't kept. I was never gonna sell her, the girl mumbled. Not really. Ione sobbed. I know, baby. It's okay now. Coulter tucked another log into the flames, hands trembling. He stared into the fire like it could burn away the past, or the future, or whatever hung above them now like a loaded sky. When the girl finally fell into real sleep, breathing warm and slow, Ione leaned against Coulter. Not for comfort. For gravity. She's all I've ever had, she whispered. Everything else was taken. He nodded. Then we don't let them take her. Ione looked up, eyes fierce. You saw someone, didn't you? He didn't answer. But that night, he set a tripwire by the barn. Slept with his rifle across his knees. Listened to the wind like it spoke a language he hadn't heard since war. And just before dawn, it snapped. Not the wind. The tripwire. Coulter was on his feet in seconds, boots slamming the floor. He flung open the cabin door and saw the figure retreating. Tall, wrapped in oilskin, moving fast into the white. He didn't shoot. Not yet. But he followed. The storm had softened. The world was dim blue and gray, the kind of color that makes truth easier to see. He caught up to the man at the creek bed. The man turned, startled, hand on a pistol. Coulter didn't blink. Back off, the man said. Ain't none of your business. You left a woman and child to die. The man scoffed. She was used goods. Wasn't my job to carry her sickness. Coulter stepped closer. You came back for the girl? She's not yours. Coulter raised the rifle but didn't point it. That don't mean she's yours either. The man sneered. You want to keep someone else's problem? Go ahead. Just don't act like you're a hero for it. Coulter's voice turned quiet. I buried my daughter under a pine tree with a lassoed doll and prayers that didn't work. Now there's a girl in my cabin with the same doll, same eyes, same sound when she sleeps. The wind picked up, pulling at both their coats. You think that means something? The man asked. I don't know what it means, Coulter said. But I know what it doesn't. It doesn't mean you get to come back now like you earned anything. The man spit in the snow. Keep her then. See how long it takes before she breaks you too. Coulter watched him turn and walk away, steps fading without echo. He didn't follow. When he returned, the girl was sitting up, pale but awake, a mug of warm milk cupped in her hands. I had a dream, she said softly. You carried me out of fire. Coulter sat beside her. It was snow. I know. But it felt like fire inside. She handed him the doll. She's yours again, if you want her. He stared at it. The faded stitching. The lavender scent barely clinging. Then he shook his head. No, he said. She belongs to you now. Ione stood in the doorway, hands clasped over her mouth. Her shoulders trembled, but she wasn't crying. She was breathing. The snow kept falling. But inside the cabin, something had shifted. The past was no longer the weight they carried. It was the reason they knew how to hold one another now without letting go. Coulter lifted the doll, kissed its forehead, then handed it back with steady hands. Sometimes, he whispered, we give away what we love because we don't believe we deserve to keep it. The girl nodded. But we do. He looked at Ione, then back at her. Yes, he said. Now we do. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.